Although there are no signs of civilization here, this is still part of Beijing. In fact, 2/3 of Beijing is populated with mountainous regions. Deep within them are the North Canal and the Chaobai and Yongding rivers, which intersect and converge to create 50,000 hectares of wetlands. On the outskirts of the city, humans and animals are in much closer contact. But their habitat has been shrinking as the city continues to expand. At the border between nature and civilization, the relationship between human and animal life has evolved from hostility and exploitation to coexistence. To continue on this path, we must all learn to live in harmony with our neighbors, whomever they may be. Far to the southwest in Beijing is the Shidu town, one of the city's most breathtaking scenic areas. During the 20 years when Tai Fangyong has been running this restaurant, he has welcomed all kinds of customers. But not all of them are whom you might expect. The Juma River, which runs right by the restaurant, stems from the depth of the Taihang Mountains. In this section, the river's course flows along the steep cliffside that overlooks the town and a series of shallow shoals that are home to a rare species of bird. As of today, there are less than 2,000 black storks in China, making them just as rarefied as the giant panda. The shoals are an ideal place to forage for these storks, because the water is so shallow that they won't have to get their wings wet. Meanwhile, the cliffs above provide ample protection for them to find rest and raise their young. These rare karst landforms in northern China are natural homes for the birds. But for humans, their beauty attracts visitors from all across the globe. Since the 1980s, the mountain villages here have become tourist spots, with new roads, hotels, and restaurants being built almost every year. Since the fish from the shallows are a local delicacy, the storks have had to compete with the local fishermen for their food. In winter, there is almost nothing for them to eat. Now they have only two options: stay and starve, or leave and live. The shoals underneath Liudu Bridge are a natural feeding ground for the storks and are right outside Tai Fengyong's restaurant.
我从小这儿到大的，小时候就看这种鸟。你要不咱说农村的话，就是以前逃荒要饭，怎么回事？老家没得吃了，就得拉家带口就得走。你像黑鹳也一样，你这儿没吃的了，一展翅膀飞走了，那要吃的去哪儿？想法让它过冬嘛。其实鸟啊，它也有感情，它都通灵性。你对它好啊，它就比较亲近你。所以怎么着，无论如何，今年也得想办法，把这鸟得留着。
Tai is not the only one to take on this noble cause. Wu Xiaoshan, a zookeeper and volunteer for wildlife rescue, has also joined the effort. Though even with his experience, finding a way to feed the birds in a way that is natural to them will take some time.
野生动物呢，我们首先呢要搞清楚它平时习惯性的在哪儿觅食。8度、6度、7度是它经常来觅食的地儿。从本意上呢，不要过多的干扰它那个自然生活规律，这样呢就让黑鹳感觉呢不是说，食物来了像我们点个外卖似的那么容易，还是更希望它去按照自然的生活规律去觅食。
Today will be their first feeding of the year. Although this section of the river isn't very deep, the 100 kilograms of pond loaches they dump into the water vanish instantly between the rocks. The men have no idea where the loaches will end up, or if the storks will ever even find them. It seems as if our unexpected visit has alerted the storks, and for now they remain cautious. But it hasn't deterred the local fishermen.
这个电线杆底下这个竹竿就是这个电鱼工具的那个插到水里和捞鱼的部分，尤其一些小鱼，就基本上就属于那种断子绝孙的状态了，是对这个鱼类资源破坏是最严重的一种方式。
The two men are not yet satisfied with their first experiment, but vow to continue their efforts until they have found a more effective method. Yet the storks are not the only ones who battle the cold and hunger in these mountains. Winter can also be especially difficult for these mountain macaques. For most of the year, the warm and moist climate of southern China is an ideal place for a macaque. But the temperatures here have dropped to lower than -10 degrees Celsius. Many of these macaques were used in animal performances when they were young. Now released back into the wild, they are free once again. After years in captivity, they are much happier to be rulers of their own territory. Now they have given birth to a new generation, and their families have continued to grow. To weather the harsh winters, they travel from village to village, snatching up whatever leftovers they can find. Yet while their presence might not always be appreciated, the locals seem willing enough to tolerate them. There are other animals who rely on humans for food as well. The cinereous vulture, Beijing's largest bird of prey. Even with a keen sense of sight, they rarely attack animals because of their relatively small talons. Instead, they take advantage of the discarded chicken meat from farms. It is as good as any meal, but it is hardly enough. To survive out here, even those at the top of the food chain must make the most of their opportunities. While the effects of urban sprawl may be beneficial to animals in certain situations, their instincts still tell them that humans are a threat to their way of life. To get the black storks to drop their guard, Wu Xiaoshan decides it's time for a new approach.
时间嘛，你要投的话，黑鹳一般是早晨天不亮，说6点多呀、7点左右，它就下来觅食。如果我要投的话，我就是夜里边投。夜里边谁也不知道，省着让人发现了，或者你逮啊，你投了让人给逮走了。好多放生的就是前面投，后边逮。
By releasing the fish at night, the storks shouldn't be disturbed, and their food won't be immediately caught by fishermen. The plan is to release the fish little by little, so the birds can gradually get used to feeding here.
非常的冷，希望明天那个黑鹳有个好胃口吧。
In the morning, they return to the riverside to watch and wait. Soon, a small flock arrives. It appears their idea has worked.
半小时吃饱了。哎呦！ 他给我表演飞板，我的天，我太棒了！哎呀呀呀，就在我身边，在我这里，哦，太好！你看，这就是我做前期工作做的成效哈。
The men repeat the process for the next couple months until the black storks start coming every day. Once their feeding habits begin to become less frequent, they'll know they've provided enough food for the stocks. After the spring festival, the temperature will rise, and there will be more food to go around. This will be the last feeding of the winter.
多好的地方！最起码取消这个小河鱼这道菜，如果要真的能落实的话，可能会很好。
各个饭馆贴上哈，说这大家不点这道鱼，对，然后呢就相当于没有市场。
Tai Fengyong distributes informative brochures among his customers. Surprisingly, some customers have even decided to give back to the storks.
也祝你新年快乐！
谢谢博士，
我们走了。现在当务之急是保持这个种群能够在这儿能够生活下去。如果我们不投喂呢，很可能这个种群就在这儿消失了。
Beijing is surrounded on 3 sides by mountains, which act as a wall between the city and the wildlife behind them. Although it's impossible to completely separate the two, the natural barrier provides safety for a variety of other, less adaptable creatures. However, there are also many opportunities to find similar refuge within the city limits. These wetlands contain a rich diversity of animals and plants. Through careful observation, you can find a variety of animals dwelling here, even amongst these common-looking reeds. Wild Duck Lake is Beijing's largest wetland nature reserve and is also its most biodiverse. Here there are more than 200 bird species. Tens of thousands of migratory birds come to the reserve each year, whether it is just for a brief stopover or a more permanent residency. The golden eagle, the indisputable ruler of the skies. Its wingspan can reach lengths of up to 2 meters. With its strong beak and razor-sharp claws, its dominion is rarely challenged. But sometimes even the eagle is given a run for its money. This eagle has entered the territory of a magpie. 5 times smaller than the eagle, the magpie is clearly no match for a trained killer. But she's a new mother and will stop at nothing to protect her young. It's a bold move, but it pays off in the end. Perhaps a bit confused, the eagle changes course. It has been said that the weak are meat and the strong do eat. At least this time the magpie has proven this saying wrong. It's mating season here in the wetlands, and females are highly sought after. Fortunately, this male black-winged stilt seems to have little in the way of competition, and the pair are left to their ritual in peace. While their courtship is visually pleasing, more often than not, the process of mating is not as pleasant or romantic as it appears. Instead, it is a long, slow, and arduous journey that requires much tenacity. Through the process of evolution, animals have developed all kinds of strategies to raise their children. Most water birds build their nests covertly in the reeds, but this expectant mother has done just the opposite, because she knows that sometimes the most dangerous place just might be the safest. A wind farm has been built on the southern banks of the Guanting Reservoir. Here, human activity has driven away almost all of the stilt's natural predators, and by building its nest out in the open, it can detect any potential threat before it becomes a real danger. Thanks to the mother's ingenuity, a month later, 3 baby stilts hatch safely from their eggs. As with most birds, the babies are not given long to start learning how to fend for themselves. Another bird has a more unique method of raising young. Most people will instantly recognize their familiar warbling with that of an old clock. However, hearing and seeing one are 2 different things. This is the common cuckoo, and this is not its nest. Even more curious is that the bird feeding it is not its mother either. It's an oriental reed warbler. It's one of the animal world's most diabolical stories. When a cuckoo is pregnant, instead of raising it on her own, she lays it in the nest of a warbler. Unexpectedly, once her egg has hatched, the little cuckoo proceeds to kill all the other young warblers in the nest, thus eliminating the competition and ensuring its survival. Because the warbler's instinct to raise her children is so strong, she continues to feed the murderer of her own children, while the cuckoo stands by, doing nothing. In fact, no cuckoo is ever hatched or fed by its own mother, nor will it ever have to raise young of its own. Although this may seem sad or cruel to some, to the cuckoo, this is merely a way to ensure the survival of its species. And while nature can be beautiful and mysterious at times, it is rarely moral. For us, the wilderness and the city may seem like 2 wholly different realms, but for animals, there is no such distinction. Many wetland animals live in the farmlands on the outskirts of cities. Though these places may in many ways resemble their natural habitats, and even allow them to thrive, sometimes these places can be just as cruel as the wild. The water level of this reservoir has already risen by 3 meters this year. Yet no one expected it would pose a threat to a huge flock of cranes 70 kilometers away. The common crane migrates from the north to Beijing every winter. Even though completely harvested, these cornfields still have some leftover grains for the cranes to feast on. The cranes come to these fields in groups and families. But because of the lack of food, many will be unable to return to their homes due to starvation. To make matters worse, the farmlands near the reservoir they have relied on for years have been flooded for water storage. When another large flock of cranes arrive in Yanqing, staff members at the local reserve begin to worry. They know there is simply no way the farmlands will be able to support thousands of cranes at one time.
我这投食就投的这一块最好了，你看那边有路了，那边有路了，就让它踏踏实实的这修。那有回合，这个位置。
那它夜宿点实际上就一个，
哎，大部分夜宿点都奔这儿去。夜宿点不，他现在这个只要人家这块钓鱼的。
Through long hours of observation, they carefully decide the time and location to feed the cranes. The rescue center has purchased a truck full of corn, which they believe is ample enough to last the cranes throughout the winter.
朋友，大哥，
再往北边那边走点，撒开的把都撒一对儿，北边那几家是最好了。
Whether it is out of pride or caution, the cranes don't immediately accept the team's offerings. Then, as night falls, the flock of cranes settle on the frozen surface of the reservoir. On the cold, open ice, they can only generate heat by standing as close to each other as possible. Here, the night temperatures can get as low as minus 30 degrees Celsius. Even though the ice appears thick, the center of the reservoir is actually so thin that the ice can crack from wind alone. Since the thin ice makes it too dangerous for anything to approach them, these timid creatures can rest assured they'll be safe for the night. A week later, a small group of cranes decide the corn grains that have been left for them are worth the risk. Once they realize it's safe, the main flock will descend in short order. Three months later, the ice is melted, and it's time for the flock to migrate. Spring has returned, and hundreds of species of animals have re-emerged to take advantage of the warm weather and resources of a new season. But none are more important to the world around them than the honeybee. The honeybee has clear ranks and division of labor in their society. Their complex honeycombs are a means for both living and production. Bees are natural chemists. When worker bees bring back nectar, it is then fermented, decomposing indigestible polysaccharids into edible honey, providing suitable energy for themselves and other animals. While the production of honey is the most obvious characteristic of bees, their importance extends much further than the link between them and humans. The symbiosis between bees and plants is even more compelling. When bees suckle the nectar from plants, pollen gets attached to their legs, which not only feeds their larvae, but also helps plants reproduce. It is said that if bees were to disappear from Earth, mankind would only be able to survive 4 more years. Without bees, there would be no pollination, and without plants, animals and humans would also cease to exist. Luckily, some people are looking out for us. Xu Guangfan is a beekeeper, and for him, it's the busiest time of the year. It's the flowering period, and now that temperatures have started to rise, bees are migrating north to the outer suburbs. Since watermelons are also in bloom, Xu Guangfan has sent a batch of honeybees to some nearby watermelon greenhouses. Watermelon plants pollinated by bees always bear the largest fruit. Every spring and summer, Xu Guangfan and his family take their truck to the countryside to raise bees. Life is hard but simple.
我们的菜都是朋友送来的，他们知道我们缺什么就给我们送过来什么。我们就是从来到北京养蜂和他们认识的。
Life for the bees is simpler here too. If there are not enough flowers or there is a shortage of water, they can still survive on Xu Guangfan's supplies. By July, the bees have made good progress. But their job isn't over yet. Right now, flowers are in full bloom in the northern grasslands, so it's time to say goodbye to Beijing. But there's one last thing to do before they go. Every year, as a reward for their collaborative efforts, Xu Guangfan shares some watermelons with his bees. And now it's time for them to take another journey together. In the deep countryside near a section of the Great Wall lies a peculiar structure jutting up from the flat farmland around it. It's almost unrecognizable, eroded by centuries of wind and water. But the locals here know its history well. But perhaps no one knows this ancient relic better than the family of little owls inhabiting it. Surrounded on four sides by large tracts of farmland, this dilapidated structure is situated right in the middle of a candy land of insects and other small creatures for them to gorge upon. Four full-grown young owls are poised to leave the nest. It will be a night to remember. But before they depart, they will enjoy one last meal prepared by their mother. The strongest of them makes the first move. Last come, last serve. Sometimes you have to walk before you can run. The young owls, not yet adept at flying, tentatively hop from ledge to ledge, trying to muster up the courage to take the big leap. One by one, they disappear into the darkness. Somebody still has a lot to learn. Finally, the last owlet decides to take the plunge. When the sun rises, the tower falls silent again, but it will be waiting for them when the night owls return next year. For those living in the suburbs or farther out in the countryside, wild encounters are much more common. In the lower reaches of Mi Un Reservoir, near the banks of the Chao Hua River, lies a farm owned by a man named Wang Shanfu. Every morning he opens the gate of his chicken coop to let them forage in the woods. Lately, he's been finding chicken carcasses strewn about his farm.
耗子不会下这么大的功夫，它打这个洞来。哦，然后你看这个地方，这个土是新搞出来的。前天我们到处找它。
Wang grew up in this part of the countryside and is familiar with most of the animals in these mountains. It doesn't take him long to find the trail.
你看这块地呢，刚旋耕过，比较松软。这个有动物的话呢，在上面行走的这个脚印儿。
To catch a thief, one must be equally cunning. At midnight, our culprit returns to the scene of the crime. The hog badger. Even with nobody around, it is still on high alert.
我看他昨天是进去了，那儿有一这个像獾的脚印儿。
这个像獾的脚印儿。
这个是獾的脚印儿。
这个是獾的脚印儿。 这个是獾的脚印儿。 这个是獾的脚印儿。 这个是獾的脚印儿。 这个是獾的脚印儿。
这个像獾的脚印儿。 这个印子，实际上这不是犄角印儿，因为这个身体小。
According to Wang Shenfu, this is the first time a badger has killed any of his chickens.
就在前面这儿就有一个獾洞，他在这地方住了，已经有4、5年了。这我们也没有抓过他。他现在的话，离那个鸡舍又近，可能是这近水楼台，抓起比较方便了。
Since badgers tend to stay in the same dens as their predecessors, their caves can be quite complex, having been rebuilt and renovated several times over. Some badger holes are more than 100 years old.
因为我觉得我们跟这群獾的话相安共处啊，因为也4、5年了。前几年呢，没有发现它们抓鸡，它也许是怀孕了，生了小獾了，都有可能。
It is not Wang's intention to harm the badger. Instead, he plans to wait, hoping that once it becomes less desperate for food, it will stop stealing his chickens.
其实你要说这个损失大嘛，我觉得也应该不算特别大。你养个猫、养个狗、养个宠物，这个消费它也不低。想开点，自我安慰就相当于得了，就算它，就像我们养的宠物了。想想的话呢，也挺好玩的。
Of course, the badger is only too happy to take advantage of Wang's better nature. Wang resigns to allowing his pesky neighbor to continue plundering his coop, which amounts to around 1 or 2 chickens a day.
因为从农村从小长大的嘛，我觉得它就是组成了我们的生活，就觉得这些东西的存在着，给我们很多乐趣。等我们长大之后，发现这些东西呢越来越少了，就觉得好像这个生活呀失去了好多。
A true man of nature, Wang is strong in his belief that the land he lives on is not just his own, but should be shared with the plants, trees, and wildlife around him. Today, half the world's population live in cities. Having become accustomed to the safety and conveniences the cities afford us, it's easy to forget the cost modernization has had on the natural environment. Yet life always finds a means, and man and animal will continue to learn how to coexist in the most unique and wondrous ways. To capture footage of the cranes at Wild Duck Lake, the camera crew had to battle freezing conditions, with temperatures as low as -30°C. And it wasn't just the crew who felt the effects of the blistering cold.
上面现在全是冰雪。飞机差点就回不来了，飞得过去的时候，那个风把这个镜头给吹得死了，就上路了，然后那镜头大了，就那样。
To get a close-up of the cranes spending the night out on the ice, the crew had to predict exactly where the birds might congregate. The ice is so thin here. With one misstep, they might fall right through the ice.
那冰杆那么大，是整个官厅水库。我们只有5个机器，篝火要混到鹤群当中去。只要混到一次，10天只要混进一次，就 OK。
Unfortunately, the crew was unable to get the shots they wanted. But luckily, one of the cameras captured the flock as they were landing to feed. The crew has lived alongside these animals for the past 2 years. Throughout our filming, we have tried everything possible to create the most realistic depiction of how these amazing creatures live, think, and feel, even when our own health and safety were at risk. We firmly believe that the only way to truly understand these animals is to get up close and personal and accurately document the ways in which they have learned to coexist with us. During the course of our filming, we have come to realize that we are not so different. Animals build their homes, raise their families, and endure hardships just like us. It is our sincere hope that we all continue to respect them and their habitats, so we can all share this wonderful world together.